Hi, it's Rachel with Just In Case You, and today we're talking about just in case you're considering adoption. We have Shannon Michael Larimer and his partner Wes with us today, and who knows, we might even get a little cameo appearance of their newborn baby Sean.
I think some of the questions I asked myself was, why do I want a child? Do I want a child? Do we want a child? I've seen statistics that talk about live births, over half of them being unplanned pregnancies. Well, obviously in our world, that's not going to happen. You have to really work for it. So I'd ask myself, and we had to ask ourselves if it's something we really wanted. And if so, how do we go about making this happen? Because there's surrogacy, there's adoption, there's all kind of routes, and eventually, I think adoption was right for us.
So after you both were on the same page and said, yep, baby it is, what was your next step?
The next step was just kind of figuring out how we wanted to go about having a kid. It was whether we wanted to try to engineer our own by doing surrogacy, or going through the state, or through adoption, and really kind of weighing out what we could do to help a kid grow up and be a part of a family. And so for us, we chose to go the adoption route. It was one for us that was obviously more affordable financially, and we feel that we can take that extra money we would have put towards surrogacy and put it into his life. Help him with education, make sure he gets good schooling, and grows up as best we can do financially.
Yeah, and there's several. He mentioned it. There's several ways to adopt. You can do state adoption, right? So Department of Child and Family Services, DCF. You can do private adoption. Private adoption is where it's a lot easier to get an infant. You can go through the state, but usually you're going to get an older child, and a lot of times they're going to be really special needs. And bless the hearts of the people that are ready to take on that challenge right out of the gate. I think if you have your own child and something happens to them, you're ready to take it on. But when you really do have to engineer your family, I think that was a good way to put it, I think anybody is going to try their best to do what's best for themselves and for their family. And so we ultimately chose private adoption. So the next step really is to find a lawyer and agency to represent you. And in our case, we got lucky because we just had a phone call from a friend who knew somebody who worked with a lawyer, and it happened for us in about 2 weeks once we really started getting going, and it's supposed to take about 2 years.
I was going to say that's lightning fast. So
yeah, it was really
definitely
fast.
Somebody was up there on your side.
There you go.
Yeah.
And we were told it was actually going to be as much as 3 years.
Did you talk to other parents who had adopted just to get familiar with the process? So
absolutely. And I think what was amazing was to find out how many friends we have that have either been adopted or know someone that's adopted or have adopted themselves. And it's really interesting because it's kind of a quiet topic, because I know one thing that we've talked about together is when people ask us about him, the first thing they say is, oh, whose is he? And really he's ours. So that's really been interesting, because we don't want him to have a stigma of being like, oh, I'm adopted. He's ours, he's our son, and so we want to raise him that way, not as our adopted kid, so to speak. We don't want that to sort of stick. So he'll know about his background and his family and his biological family, but he's ours, so he's part of our family, and that's really interesting. But I think a lot of the questions that come up, they come up out of curiosity, just because we're same-sex family, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mentioned a couple different routes and steps you could take. So the first step really in any adoption, whether you go through the state, whether you go through private adoption, is you have to get a home study. So the home study is where somebody who's licensed to do this by the state, they check you out as a couple, as individuals, to make sure that you can provide for the child, really. And it's really good that they do that, right? You don't just want anybody to be able to come and grab any kid they want. So there are extensive background checks, there are criminal background checks, financial background checks, home safety checks.
And that happens throughout the whole process. So before we adopted, ours obviously happened in an accelerated situation. But before, they'll come to your house, they'll talk with you, they'll counsel you, they'll ask some really hard questions. They do a local, state, and federal background checks. They do drug testing. They do very extensive financial background checks as well to make sure that you have the capital to put down, and also to take care of him throughout his life.
I think they should do that with every family, actually.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, truthfully, that was the difficult
You need
part
a
in the
license
sense
to
that
drive
you
a
had to do it
car,
so
to
quickly.
shoot a gun, but you don't need it to raise a child. So
Right, exactly.
Wish they would do this on parents that just have kids.
Right.
Before they have kids. But no, I mean, that part was accelerated for us, so it was very stressful to have all that done within a month, essentially, and to complete all the paperwork. I mean, we're talking like a stack of paperwork to complete.
What was the most surprising part of the process that shocked?
I would say, honestly, for me, it was the just kind of impersonal nature of adoption. People think it's very rosy, and I think they go into it with rose-colored glasses, and it's really not. It's difficult and it's hard. You have to really, I think, take into consideration the parents as well. We know a lot of same-sex actually couples that have adopted as well, and they look at it differently. They want to like go in and get the kid and leave, and we really took the time to know, and as much as we can, to get to know the birth parents. I think that's really important, and I think it's important for Sean because we want to create a history for him and let him know kind of where he came from and his background. And for us, getting to know the parents was important because they said some things to us that we want to relay to him. When a parent selects you to be the parents for their child.
And that's always how it works.
Yeah.
It's not the reverse.
No.
You don't pick a child in private adoption. The birth parents pick you.
Right.
Whereas in the state, there are kids that are up and need homes, and you kind of go in reverse of what we do.
Right. And I think for us, to go into a little bit more of the personal side that I think is actually the cool part of why we got chosen, is we got a phone call saying that we had a young couple that were ready to have a child very soon, within like a month or two, and fully healthy child to date. And they asked us if we would be considered in being submitted for this family. And we were the only gay couple actually to be submitted. There was, I think, 28 straight couples and profiles. Us as the gay couple, and I think there might have been an African-American couple that was thrown in as well. And the mother got to pick us, and we said, well, how did you choose us? I'm curious. We met them for dinner after they pick you. We went out to dinner with them and got to talk with them, and then that's our opportunity to see if this is what we want to move forward with as well. And then if they have any hesitations, they can back out at that point. And went to dinner with them and talked with them, and I said, I'm really just curious a couple things, like, why did you pick us, and how would you want to raise your child? And that's really important to me because I would like to and kind of infuse that into my parenting style, kind of as an honor to them for allowing us to raise their child and as ours. And she said, well, I was just kind of going through the books, and I picked them at first on instinct. I really just looked at the pictures and picked the couples that I thought they looked like nice people, and which was cool. But then she got a little bit deeper and said, I wanted to pick someone that I figured that by choosing you guys, I could give you something that you could never have, and I will always be the mom. And I thought, that's interesting. And that's something that we had heard before kind of going into the adoption. And I think that Wes would probably agree that helps gay couples, especially on the male side.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first started looking into adoption, I thought, well, as a gay male couple, we're going to have a harder time getting picked. But what we're finding, both from our friends and talking to lawyers, gay male couples are actually getting picked pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And it is because, as he said, there's this idea in the birth mom's mind where she says, I will always be the only mom. And once you hear that, it clicks and it makes perfect sense. But it's never anything we would have come to on our own. I know one of the things she was asking about was steps. We even forgot about talking about the profile. So you definitely have to put together a profile. During the home study, after you kind of get approved to have a child placed with you, then you have to put together a profile to basically sell yourself.
And so what was in your portfolio, if I say?
You know, he did it. He actually put the majority of it together. We never really had a formal book put together because we just didn't have time. I think we stayed up almost all night.
I stayed up all night gathering pictures because, again, this case came to us really quickly.
Yeah.
And so I stayed up all night gathering pictures, and I kept thinking to myself, well, you know, if I was her or him and, you know, trying to choose a couple, what would I want to see? I'd want to see, obviously, two happy, healthy people, but I want to know that they're going to be at home a lot. So I chose nice homey pictures. I chose pictures of us with my nieces and my nephews, so us with kids.
Sorry.
One second for that.
It's probably already. Actually, while he's doing that, I'm going to jump back to something that I think was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The father, Sean's biological father, is quiet and kind of a quiet guy. He didn't really speak a lot in the beginning, and we had asked him why he chose us as well. And I thought it was really cool, his response, because he said, you know, well, I picked you guys because you were gay, and I was kind of like, why? You know, why? He had so many options. You just don't kind of wonder why someone would just say that. And he says, well, you know, because I figured that, one, I have a friend that is, and he's a really nice guy, and it just didn't, you'd never know unless he would tell you. And he says, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. He says, but beyond that, you asked how I wanted our child to be raised, and he said, you know, for me, we wanted to raise, we want a child that is raised to be non-judgmental, and we figured that by having two gay guys, you've been rejected by society, your family, friends.
You're living by example.
Had to kind of go through a lot. So we want him to know that we come from a lower income background, and that you know, we really cared for him, but wanted to have a good home for him, and we can't provide that, so we want to find someone that can. So that to me was a home run for him, because I was like, wow, that was really impactful. I wouldn't have expected that response, but it's also in line with how I want to raise my child anyway. So I just thought that was pretty special.
Yeah, one of the things they say is, no matter what, the kid you end up with is the kid you were meant to be with, and I think in a lot of ways that's true. And at first it might sound cliche, but through this process, I really feel that is the case.
I wouldn't have believed that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Back to the portfolio or the presentation, you guys.
Yeah.
Homey pictures and.
I'll actually kind of restart that for you. So after the home study, we had to actually put together a portfolio of ourselves so that potential matches, which is what they're called, potential matches, might pick us. And so you have to put together basically a portfolio selling yourself. And so we chose images of us being at home and playing with my nieces and nephews, stuff that we thought might appeal to somebody who was looking for a good family for their child. And you can go about the profile a lot of different ways. There are organizations that you can pay a lot of money and they'll put it together for you. You can do it yourself. You can even do something like Snapfish to put together the profile. We didn't have much time, actually, so I stayed up all one night and just gathered the pictures myself and put little sayings in there with them, so hopefully to make an impact. And we showed our profile book, and the lawyer called us the next night and says, well, I have news. She picked you.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, good choice. Okay, I can
Yeah,
tell
there you
from a very personal standpoint, you guys are exceptional parents. And
Thank you.
any child would have been lucky to have you, but Sean was the lucky candidate, and we put him to sleep. Hopefully, we
Taking
didn't
the time. You gave some great advice for parents who are considering adoption. So until next time, just in case you.